This is Off Script with Trish Glose, intimate interviews with interesting people. In front of my microphone today is Chris Dennett. Did you just laugh when I said interesting people?
I did just laugh.
You're not the only one. A lot of people laugh at that, and it's they're interesting to me, I guess. So
Yeah, I've lived this life. I suppose it's interesting, but it's just funny for someone to say, "Oh, you're interesting."
Oh, well, okay, you're interesting, Chris Dennett. Chris Dennett, for those of you who don't know, owner of Elements, tapas bar in downtown Medford, also Beerworks in Medford and Jacksonville.
That's right. Yeah, 2 locations.
Dad,
Yeah.
husband, dog owner.
Also a son.
A son.
Turns out.
What else can we think of? We're going to talk a lot about, well, not a lot about Elements and Beerworks, but a little bit because it is your life and it's a huge part of your life right now.
Yeah.
But first, where are you from originally?
I was born in Redondo Beach, California.
Okay.
And so Southern California. I guess I'm a Californiagonian.
Nice. I don't think I've heard that before. A Californiagonian. What was your childhood like? How long were you in Southern California?
9 years.
Oh, okay. That's significant.
Yeah. So I was 3 years in sort of Hermosa Beach area, and then about 6 years in El Segundo. We moved close to the airport because my father was a advertising executive for Western Airlines.
Right. Mark Dennett.
Mark Dennett, yes.
Who I've met, actually. He helped us with a poll once for an election.
Yeah, that's what he does now. He does a lot of polling and public speaking and stuff, but he comes kind of from that marketing and broadcast area.
Smart man.
I believe so.
He's very smart.
If he's going to watch this, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So smart.
You smart, Dad.
So smart. Well, what was it like growing up next to the beach? I mean, was it everything that people think of? Were you on the ocean all the time?
Not really. Sort of to some degree. El Segundo is a funny place because there's the beach right there, but then you have a big hill that comes over after PCH, and then most of El Segundo is just slightly inland. It's kind of like what everybody thought, but probably a lot more tar on your feet than people know.
Okay.
You spend a lot of time going to the beach and pulling tar off. And this was the late 70s, early 80s, and there had been some oil spills and stuff. So.
Oh, okay. That's not pleasant.
Yeah, but it was, I suppose, an idyllic lifestyle. Back then, at that period of time, that part of Los Angeles, the South Bay area, was super safe. We would go trick-or-treating at night and ride bikes around until dark. It was like you got to be home at dark. Like,
right.
Okay,
well, one of the last few podcasts, he was talking about, when the street lamps came on, that's when you knew
time to go home.
Go home, yeah. And I think everybody kind of has a little element of that. Did you grow up with siblings?
No, actually, I'm an only child.
That explains a lot.
Does it?
Just kidding.
I ended up, I have 2 stepbrothers that I call brothers at this point, and they've been my brothers since I was 15. So, I've got almost 30 years of history with them, as being a family member. But no, at the very beginning, I was just born to the Dennetts in Southern California. Yeah.
Love me and only me. When did your parents divorce?
They got divorced when I was, I want to say 11.
Okay.
Either 10 or 11. It was when we had moved to Jacksonville.
Oh, okay. So you had moved from, it was straight from Southern California to Jacksonville?
Yeah, to Jacksonville.
Okay. What was the reasoning for the move?
Probably not all of the motivations were shared with me. But ultimately, I think that my parents were not real interested in raising me long-term in Southern California.
Totally.
And my mom's from Oregon, and my mom and dad met at University of Oregon. So the way we even found it was my mother and I, when I was 9 years old, we were heading up the coast. We decided to take Highway 1 and 101 up the California coast, visit all the nice places along the coast, and she was headed to a college reunion in Eugene. So we got about as far as Crescent City, and she said, well, about here we should, go over. And we saw this little advertisement for like a doll museum, which was at the McCulley House. And she was looking at this thing, and she saw the little 238 sign over on the left-hand side of the trifold brochure. She said, I think I know where this place is. At one point, she had left for a semester because she wasn't doing well at U of O and had come down to Ashland, that I think at that time was SOC. And she said, yeah, I had a friend who used to take me out to Jacksonville, and I know exactly where this is. We should go check it out.
So you guys went to Jacksonville to check it out?
We went to Jacksonville to check it out, and this was in probably July. And it was a neat town. I think my mom was sort of nostalgic for it. There was some intention, I think, at some level to have us move in general. And so we went to Eugene, and my dad flew up, and then we all kind of drove back together, and we went back through Jacksonville to look at this house, and we bought it, moved in November of 83, and opened a bed and breakfast.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think everyone's first impression of Jacksonville is, I want to live here.
Yeah.
Mine was, at least. I just thought it was the most beautiful, charming town.
Yeah, it's a neat place. I loved living there. I still love Jacksonville.
So you guys move in 83, open a bed and breakfast, and then how soon after that did your parents split?
Not too long after that,
Okay.
like probably a year and a half. It wasn't easy. You know, my dad was in a situation where Western Airlines was folding, and they were undergoing a merge with Delta. And
Okay.
so he was required to basically still be down in Los Angeles doing that. So it was my mom and I living basically by ourselves up here in Jacksonville, and he would commute and come up on the weekends.
That's hard.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, they didn't share a whole bunch of that information with me. So
Did it ever have any sort of impact on you later, or at the time was it just like, it's all good?
You know, funny you ask that. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's had an impact on me. I don't think so. I remember when they told me, their very first important thing, they're like, this is not your fault. It's not because of you.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, of course it's not my fault. How would this be my fault?
Crazy?
This
It's not my
is
fault.
you guys.
Yeah,
It's
your issues.
not my fault.
Exactly. That's funny. I absolutely remember the day when my parents said we're getting a divorce. And I mean, I can remember every single second of that. And I was 8. And I mean, there's just so many elements that you forget in your life, but there are those ones that
and
just
they're
stick.
sort of indelibly burned right into your memory. I mean, we were at McKee Bridge. They took me up to the Applegate and did the deed there.
So dirty. So your childhood was slightly split. I mean, Southern California and then here in Southern Oregon. What was high school like for you? Because you went to high school here.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to high school at St. Mary's.
Okay.
So I'm a St. Mary's alum. My stepfather was a teacher there. So that's where I went to high school. And I probably had a pretty normal high school. I disliked myself. And
So normal.
right? That's what I mean. Like totally normal high school life.
Right.
Played sports, was on student council, did terrible in school, but did okay on tests. So
That surprises me. I mean, it does and it doesn't, because I consider you easily one of the smartest people I know. But you're also a big reader, though.
yeah, I love reading.
Exactly. Did you love reading in high school?
Not the way I do now. No,
Okay.
I think I, like other high school kids, I did what I could to not read the books, that they told us to read. It was actually kind of funny because it was after high school where I started going through some of the books that they had, that were like required reading for high school, and I was like, gosh, that's actually a pretty good book.
I should have read
Yeah,
that.
why didn't I read this earlier?
I know you and Chuck have talked about that too. He was the same way.
Yeah.
Horrible student, but really, really, really smart. And then it was after high school where he was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. Maybe I
Yeah.
should read some of this
Yeah,
stuff.
that's kind of what happened.
So what came after high school then?
Well, directly after high school, I went straight to college, and I went to college in Indiana at a Quaker college, a small liberal arts college called Earlham, which they accepted non-traditional students, which is what I was. So when you have good test scores, but you walk out of high school with a 2.3 GPA.
Right. You're special.
Some schools look at you like, so why didn't you do anything? And I'm like, it was boring.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I just think it's not for everybody.
Yeah, probably not. But landing at college, it was great. I played baseball in college for the first year. And then after that, I didn't because, I probably had an attitude. I didn't get along well with the baseball coach. And I just stopped playing for whatever reason, and kind of focused on other things.
Did you finish or did you take any time off from?
I did finish. I have a degree.
Okay, good.
But
I wasn't suggesting anything.
I took a year off, and it was funny because during the year that I took off, in between my in between my junior and senior year, I took that year off, and during that entire year, my dad would introduce me to people as his dropout son.
Oh, Dad!
This is my college dropout son. I know he was trying to do is just kind of push me back to doing it.
Yeah.
And eventually, I realized, look, this is like dropping out of the marathon at mile 22. Like, I should just finish this. But my junior year of college I had done at Aberdeen University in Aberdeen, Scotland. And so after I got back from Scotland, I was just kind of like, you know what, I don't really feel like going to college right now.
Totally.
So,
why Scotland?
I don't know. So, I mean, I guess at the time that it was the only program that my college offered that was an entire year. And I wanted to go somewhere where I could be for the entire college year. I didn't want to just go for like half a year, or like a semester, 2 semesters or anything. And it went through the Great Lakes College Association. And I'd always sort of been fascinated with the UK. And I thought they spoke English. So I went over there thinking that I would understand everything.
Nothing.
Well, not at first. Yeah, it's weird.
It is weird. I mean, weird in a great, awesome way.
Yeah, I mean, even the very first like arrival, you know, like I get into this taxi and this guy looks at me and he goes, "Fet like." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Fet like."
Okay, what does that mean?
I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying." He's all, "Fet's this, it's a car. Fet's that's the street. Fet like, mate."
Okay, what?
Yeah, that was my response, and he goes, "How's it going?"
Oh, because he knew you didn't understand him?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Aberdonian accent's really bizarre because the WH's make an F sound. So what is fet and when is fan and where is far? So, you know, if someone asks you where are you going, like they'll say, far guante.
Did your heart sink when you're just like, oh?
No, actually, it was really exciting for me. I was like, oh, wow, I am going to learn a foreign language.
You really, I mean, I want to say your accent's on point.
Well, I was there for 11 months, so.
Mm-hmm. Did you make any long life friends that you still keep in touch with?
No.
No?
I mean, I made friends that I thought would be that, but that's just not how it shook out.
Any life lessons in Scotland this year that you were there?
I don't know, probably plenty. That's sort of a difficult question. One of the life lessons, well, probably the most important one in Scotland is that I can do it. You know,
I like that.
That learning through the whole time that, you know, being that far away, being completely isolated on your own, there's no safety net really. I mean, like I could call home, or, you know, they could give me a credit card and I could buy groceries with it or something. But, you know, from the standpoint of like actual support, there wasn't much there. You know, it was sort of, it was kind of like, you know, you got to do this, kid. And,
totally. How old were you?
20.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that is an amazing self-discovery when, you know, and that sort of hit me too, looking for jobs outside of Medford. And I remember my mom sitting down with me and she's like, well, why do you want to get a job in Portland or this big city? And I'm like, well, I just want to prove that I can do it. And I remember her saying, well, you know you can do it. And
yeah,
I think
you've already proven that.
Exactly, yeah. And I think knowing within yourself, like, I can do this, maybe going into it, or then after on the other side saying, I did that. I can do it. It's such an amazing feeling. Yeah,
when it really kind of struck home, so I had, during spring break, I was trying to figure out what to do during spring break, and I had kind of a weird experience there. I took an electric guitar with me to Scotland that did not have an amplifier, so it was like super, super quiet. And then I got kicked out of the original dorm I was living in for having a music instrument because the person across the hall was complaining about the noise on the hall.
Oh, geez.
And so that I'm talking to them, and they call the people in charge of dorms wardens. So I had to go to talk to the warden. And I was like in block D. So I had to go talk to the warden and be like, so what's going on?
Right.
Yeah, and he's like, so when are you moving out?
Solitary confinement.
Yeah, so basically I get kicked out of Dunbar Hall, and then I got sent up to this place called Hillhead, and so I'm staying at Hillhead and living in this flat with all of these Greek people. So like all of my roommates were Greek people, and And as soon as I get in the flat, like the second night I'm there, they're in trouble for being too loud also. So I got transferred into this flat of people. And so we're sitting there, being talked to by the Warden of Hillhead.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just sort of, like face palming this one and like shaking my head and smiling. And, the lady's like, so, why are you laughing? I'm like, because this is ridiculous. I've lived here for 2 days.
Right.
And I'm already in trouble. Like,
troublemaker.
Come on. Yeah. So I had been asking those Greek guys, I was like, what should I do for spring break? And they're like, well, you should come to Greece. I was like, okay. So I flew to Athens and stayed with them for a few days and then ended up on a ferry one morning on the way to Mykonos. And then when I got to Mykonos, I basically ran out of money. And there was no bank there that would give me like a credit card advance or anything. And I didn't have money to get back to Athens, even though I had a plane flight from Athens back to Aberdeen.
That makes me nervous.
Yeah, so I was about 12 days, 14 days, basically sleeping on the beach and homeless on Mykonos. And when I got back to Athens, I called my mom and said, hey, this just happened to me, and I'm wondering if you mind if I use this credit card you gave me to, get a hotel room. And I'll never forget, like, she said, so you were homeless in Greece for almost 2 weeks? And I said, yeah. Basically, yeah, that's what happened. And she goes, well, now you know you can do it.
Aw.
And so that was sort of...
Thanks,
Mom. she's a sympathetic woman.
No, for sure.
Not.
I've met her. She's lovely.
But that was the... so that at some level, that was sort of the encapsulation of like what I took from Scotland and from that year abroad anyways, was like, yeah, I mean, I hit some lows. I went down some weird paths, but got out of it and survived. And now I know I can do it, I suppose.
Exactly. Well, I've never been homeless, but I can only imagine that's pretty that's like bottom.
Yeah, it wasn't totally bottom because I did have a home. I did have a family that loved me. I mean, I guess I have to admit that at some level I sort of chose that, and because if the crap had really hit the fan, I probably could have made some phone calls and been on a plane the next day.
Of course.
So, don't feel too sorry for me.
Okay,
I think there was some decision in that process.
You were a bum in Greece. You were a transient in Greece.
Yeah, I was.
That's awesome. See, that's an interesting story.
Yeah, I suppose.
Right there. So you get back to school in Scotland and you finish out the year and come back to the States?
Yep, fly back to the States and then took the year off and worked in the restaurant industry because that's kind of what I'd been doing the whole time, as I'd been traveling and working and through college in general was, bussing tables, waiting tables, being a prep cook, pantry. I was a pizza cook for a little while. Like I'd kind of been doing all those things. So came back and lived in Jacksonville and worked at the Bella Union for that year.
Awesome.
And then went back in 96 and graduated in 97.
Did you know you were going to go back to school or you just weren't sure? You just needed some time off?
I think I always intended to finish, but I wasn't ready to go back. I had enough had happened to me. I felt like I'd lived quite a lot in that year away, and I wasn't really ready to go back and kind of get back to quote unquote normal.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was a decompression time. Yeah. I experienced quite a bit of culture shock coming back too. So coming back to the United States was very strange for me. And that a lot of times when I've traveled, that's always been the case for me. Is coming back to the U.S. is much more challenging than going somewhere. You expect it to be different somewhere else. But whenever you come back, it's almost as if time has stopped, right? And you show back up and everything's changed. And even really small things that you wouldn't think about, make you go, oh, that happened while I was away? And then you get struck with the fact that everybody drives a giant car and like your refrigerators are 7 times larger than they should be. And, people like Americans, we just spread, like we just take up space, probably because we have it, it's different, especially in Europe.
Yeah. And also, I think being in the restaurant industry can somewhat be addicting. Like it's just something, at least it was for me. I loved working in restaurants.
Yeah, it's absolutely addicting. Well, for me it is. I mean, I'm still doing it. I'm addicted to it.
You've made it your career.
I think some people hate it. It takes a special kind of masochist to enjoy it. But there is a real sort of camaraderie, I think, in the restaurant industry, where you realize that you're working with people. It's hard work. It's it's physically demanding at times. It's emotionally and mentally demanding at times. I wouldn't say it's the hardest work. Don't sit here and
No.
I do
ya.
a pretty easy job. But for some people, it's really difficult, that operating with the public. So we end up being pretty hard on each other. But I think that there's a protection in being hard on each other because it helps us be ready for the public being hard on us. Like it's not common that you can work in a job where you'll go somewhere and someone will literally tell me, you ruined my night. And sometimes your response is, yeah, your food was a little late.
Right.
I understand it's an important evening for you.
Right.
But on the grand scheme of things, no one died, no one got hurt.
Exactly. No, for sure. I also think with, restaurant workers, especially the ones are on the night shift, it's this band of food and drink warriors who kind of like get together after everything.
Food and drink pirates.
Exactly. And you're just, after your shift, you just kind of sit around with.
There's truth to that. There's not a lot of industries where you can. We yell at each other, right? That's what happens in a restaurant. It's fast-paced. It's 110 degrees in the kitchen. People are forgetting things. You're trying to organize stuff. I'm sure that people say things to me as a boss that they would never say to another boss at any other time, but it's almost forgivable because it's the restaurant industry. And at the end of the night, everyone goes, wow, that felt like work tonight.
Right. Want a drink?
Let's have a shot.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's like everything's okay after that.
Well, and it's just there's so many little ins and outs to, whether you're a hostess or a server and, the customer wants to be sat in this section, but it's not open yet. And they're like, well, why can't I sit there? And you're like,
yeah. I tell you what, man, I think one of the hardest jobs in the restaurant is the host.
Yeah.
You're like playing moving Tetris and trying to get everything organized, and you've got a kitchen that doesn't want everybody seated at the same time because that slams them.
Exactly.
You have servers that it's unfair to them to completely load their section in 4 tables all at once. But then you have other servers who are going, why are you always seating this person?
Right.
You need to be seating my section, because they're there to make money. And so
absolutely. Or customers not understanding why they have to wait.
Yeah.
When there's a ton of open tables, it's like, well, those are sections and they're not open yet because there's not servers for those sections. And
I think the real tragedy is that when people go into restaurants, they often think that that's the least skilled position. Like they walk in and they go, oh, you must be brand new. You're the host.
Right. You're a teenager. You have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's just not true. I
right.
mean,
Thank you. I agree. That was a really tough job at Chili's I had when I was 16.
It's not an easy job.
Well, and then you learn really the phrase, the customer's always right. They kind of have to be. Not always, but it's in those situations. You really have to just like dig deep and just...
Yeah, I think maybe a better way of thinking about it is not... if you're looking at objective truth or something, the customer's always right. That's not true. Sometimes the customer is absolutely wrong. But the customer is always the customer. And I think that's the way that it needs to be approached in the service industry.
It's the customer.
Yeah, is that person needs to leave wherever they're eating or whatever their experience is. They need to leave the hero of their own story. And if that means letting it just slide off you and say, oh, of course, yeah, and kill them with kindness, then that's what you do. Because it's not about whether they're right or wrong. It's about the fact that they're frequenting your establishment and they're your customer.
Right.
And so you just need to treat them with the kind of respect that you would treat every customer.
They're in the spotlight in this moment.
Yeah, it's their night. They're not there to see us.
They're not?
Right. In some cases, maybe, but for the most part, they're there to hang out with the people they came to dinner with. That's their experience. That's what they want. They want it to be seamless from the side, from that aspect. They're not there to listen to waiters tell jokes or listen to people's life stories.
Or I've been slammed all night and this is wrong and that is wrong. Yeah, no, for sure. So you graduate in 97.
Yes.
What comes next?
Having graduated with a degree in philosophy, I didn't know what came next. So it was a funny thing. What came next was Australia, but I should explain how that happened. Okay. I woke up, I still remember the day, it was on April 4th, and I woke up in the morning and just went, I need to go to Australia. And I hadn't had a dream or anything like that. I just sort of woke up and went, I need to go to Australia.
Okay.
And that never happens to me. It had never happened to me in the past, so I thought maybe I should pay attention to it. Like, it seems like maybe that's important. I'm feeling called.
Yeah.
And so I went to my first class, which was an aesthetics class on Westerns. And it's high-level philosophy stuff here. We would watch Western movies and talk about them.
So deep.
Yeah, well, I was basically done with my major and needed extra credits, and I was like, that sounds fun.
Great. Yeah, sounds awesome.
So I went in, and one of the girls who I was taking the class with, she said, hey, what are you doing after college? And I said, I don't know, I haven't decided yet. She goes, well, my friend and I are going to go to Australia. Would you be interested in going? And I said, yeah, let's do it.
Is this after your wake-up epiphany?
Yeah, exactly. This is like 2 hours after I woke up.
Okay, that's just crazy.
Right? Isn't it strange? So I said, yeah, I'll do it. And so I applied for this program called a work holiday visa in Australia, where you get 6 months of work visa and 6 months of just travel visa. Mm-hmm. And they only give out 100 a year. And I ended up getting visa number 98. So it was like right at the very end. I came back to Jacksonville and worked at the Bella again. And when I was working there, one of my bussers, his family and he owned a travel agency that was called Travel Australia New Zealand. So all of these pieces just sort of fell in together.
No doubt.
And in about September or October, I went traveling.
For a year?
Yeah.
In Australia?
Well, not just Australia. So I went on Air New Zealand, and Air New Zealand had this really cool ticket. So it was like a 12-month ticket.
Okay.
And you had 12 months, and you could do 5 stops. And it didn't matter when you went or how long you were at any place. You just had to call them up 2 weeks in advance and say, hey, I'm going to want to get on this plane at this particular time.
How awesome.
Yeah, it was great. So we flew from, you can look at the map over here, flew from Vancouver.
There's a map behind the camera, we should say. A map of the world.
I went from Vancouver, British Columbia, and then flew down to Rarotonga. And then I was in the Tongan Islands for a little bit. And then went to Australia, and then I was in Australia maybe 7 or 8 months.
This is in the podcast where we would put like a little graphic up with a plane and like
right.
little dots of where you...
the red line behind
Yeah, exactly, where you landed.
And then on the way back, also stayed, I visited Indonesia while I was there, and then stayed in Samoa for a bit. I was probably 2 or 3 months in New Zealand. So just did a bunch of travel down there. But when I showed up in Australia, I was in Melbourne, is where I spent the majority of the time. I showed up with $200. Like, I didn't have any money when I landed in Australia, and so I got a job the next day.
Awesome. Where?
At a place called Coriander Thai, which was a Thai restaurant in St. Kilda.
So how was this year experience? I mean, obviously you had spent a year in Scotland and time in Greece, and then now you're kind of traveling the world a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I had done a whole bunch of travel prior to this because my dad worked for the airline industry.
Right.
So, and I'd already been to Australia when I was 7. So
okay.
I'd been to more countries than states by the time I moved to Oregon. But as far as a year, I mean, it just sort of, I didn't really plan on coming back, to be honest. Like, I was sort of like, I like the world. I'm going to go see the world. I'm going to do all of these things. And I don't necessarily have any inkling to return. See how that worked?
Yeah, but you did.
I did.
You came back. And what year did you come back?
So I was, I guess, 98.
Okay.
Yeah.
To Oregon?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I flew back from Australia, it had been in Samoa on the way back, then came back to Oregon, and my intention was to move to Eugene. Mm-hmm. But it turns out it's really tough to get a job in Eugene if you're a 24-year-old philosophy major with only restaurant experience.
What?
Right? Can you believe it? So
that's ridiculous.
So I ended up back in Southern Oregon.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever, when you came back, was there that feeling again of like, ugh, I'm back in the States, or
I
no?
don't think so. I like Oregon. There's about 3 or 4 places in the world that I would live, and this is one of them. Mm-hmm. This is why I'm here. So no, I don't think, coming back I didn't have that feeling. There was no dread. It's never like I was like, oh crap, I'm back in America.
Totally.
Or I like this country. I'm proud of this place, and there's a lot of really amazing things. There's a lot of stupid things about it, but there's a lot of great things, And so for me, no, that wasn't the case at all.
Okay.
I definitely also didn't think that was it. I never have believed that, and I never believed at the time that just because I went back to some place meant that, that's it. Oh, it's over. That
You're
part,
stuck. Yeah.
I'm going to close that chapter in the book. And,
For sure.
And now what's next? So there was never that sort of idea.
Okay. So no job in Eugene, or did you end up working in Eugene?
I did for a short
Okay.
period of time. Yeah, I worked at a place called Eugene Direct Mail Service. I sorted junk mail on a big giant machine called an OCR.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, kind of. It was a terrible job. I hated everything about it.
It's one of those jobs where you're like, this is definitely what I don't want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and they wanted to keep me. They offered me more money. They offered me managerial position and stuff, and I just kind of went, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah. Okay, so what's after Eugene then?
Came back to Bedford, and one of my friends from college, who I had met my freshman year in college, he and his wife had moved to Medford.
Okay.
And I was talking with him, and he said, well, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I think I'm going to move to Japan and teach English. And he said, well, why are you going to do that? I said, because I could pay off my college loans. And he goes, well, you could pay off your college loans if you sold cars. He was working at Subaru. So I said, no, I don't want to sell cars. He's like, well, why not? And I was like, because then I'd be a car salesman.
Yes.
I don't want to do that. I don't want that to be the end of everything that I've done. And he goes, well, you can make pretty good money doing it. You should consider it. Come check it out. And then I tried it.
Yeah,
And
you were a car salesman.
I was a car salesman for 2 years. And I should say this. I want to say this. I want to give some credit to the car industry in some ways, in a lot of ways. I would not know what I know about business today if I had not had that time in the car industry. I mean, let's be honest about people in the car industry. If you were the kind of person who was not comfortable with other people and you had anxiety, like, you would be a melting puddle of human in the corner of your office, and you would never talk to anybody. Like, you have to be ready to go out there and take heat and have people not like you, and you have to be resilient enough to just kind of, it's got to be water off the back of the duck. But
Where does Danny come into all of this? Danny,
my wife, my
current,
beautiful wife.
Your current wife.
My current wife, my only wife.
Your only wife. She's your favorite.
My
She's your
first and only.
She's your favorite wife.
She's my favorite wife.
Where does she enter the picture?
So after stopping the car industry for the second time,
Okay.
then I started a furniture business, selling contract furniture. And then I didn't really like that very much, so I stopped doing that. And then I went back into the restaurant industry again and started bartending at Howie's. And so I worked at Howie's, off and on for probably 4 or 5 years. Toward about 2005 or so, she was a bartender over there, and that's where I met her.
Okay. And then did you guys together decide we want to do something in the restaurant industry? Or was it you?
We decided together on what it was that we wanted to do, but it had all, by that time, it had sort of been my dream to do it. I had a moment, it was about when I was 30, which was in 2004, when I remember kind of looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, well, you can either be a 40-year-old bartender or you could be a 40-year-old bar owner. Which direction do you want to go? And so that had kind of been, at that point, my goal. I had to kind of, I always sort of laugh about it. This is not to diminish anybody at all, but it was sort of the coming out moment, where I have to call my parents and tell them, so I'm a restaurant worker. And this is not just something that I'm doing until I figure out what I want to do with life. These are my people.
Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you.
I have to tell you that I will always probably work in the restaurant industry. And so at that point, I think that I decided, okay, well, if I'm going to do it, then I want to own. I want to be I want to make the call the shots, or what, so to speak.
Well, and I remember Chuck and I met you and Danny at what used to be called World of Wine out in Del Rio.
Yep.
We said hi. We were, just chit-chatting. And at that moment, I don't remember the year, but you said...
2006.
Okay. You said we're opening a tapas bar in downtown Medford. And I think the first thing that Chuck said was topless. And
That's
you're
what
like...
everybody says.
You're like, no, tapas.
Yeah.
And then I think, me going, I'm like, what is tapas? What is that?
Yeah.
A lot of people said a tapas bar is not going to work in downtown Medford.
Yeah, a lot of people did say that.
And that was, it's 2018 now.
Yeah, it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
We opened in December of 2006.
That's incredible.
Yeah, a lot of people said it wouldn't work. And I don't know how it worked in some ways. You know.
Well, why tapas?
Well, I think that came sort of from the standpoint that we didn't want to be a full restaurant, right? Like that was sort of our intention originally was to the whole thing evolved and changed in so many ways. When we first started talking about it, basically the genesis of Elements entirely was, my wife and I, girlfriend at the time, sitting in the backyard of my house, throwing a dog ball kind of lazily, and then one of us saying to the other, like, hey, you want to go get a drink? And then we're like, yeah, let's go to this place. Yeah, I don't like the food there. What about this place? Yeah, it's too smoky. What about this place? Yeah, we work there. What about this place? Yeah, I just don't like the vibe. What about this place? Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like where I want to go. So then I had just sort of gotten up and I went to the refrigerator and opened up a bottle of wine and took a couple glasses of wine out and handed her one. And I said, if you could go anywhere, what would it look like? And that's where we started sort of talking about it. So
that's awesome.
We had decided, that night after a bottle of wine, nudge,
wink.
nudge, wink, wink. We had decided at that point, we even had the name at that point. We're like, we want to call it Elements. We wanted to sort of incorporate these things. And I think our first concept was just so ridiculously large and, almost Disneylandish, like there's going to be a fire room and there's going to be a water room, and, but that's the wine, right?
Right.
So at the end of it
does things to us.
Yeah, a little bit later, we sort of laughed about it. And then a little bit later, we weren't allowed to date at Howie's. So I chose to be fired because I thought she made more money. And then about a month later, she got fired for some reason. And so then we're both unemployed.
Oh, crap.
And so we're sitting there, with bills to pay. And so I sold one of the cars that I owned from if I had some money. I said, well, the money's going to last about this long. Let's have a nice summer. Then it got to about September. And I was like, okay, so we should probably write a business plan. Like, if we're serious about this, let's just try to make this happen.
Yeah.
So that was in September of 2005.
And you guys did.
Yeah, I mean, within about a year, we were open.
That's amazing. Where did Beerworks come along?
Beerworks was originally when, I've always been fascinated with beer, obviously. Obviously. That doesn't have good connotations right now in popular culture, does it?
I'm fascinated with beer, so I feel you.
So when we first opened Elements, one of my friends was this guy, Will, and he worked for Columbia. And we had sort of been talking every once in a while, like, there should be a beer store around here. There should be a place where you can get craft beer. We see the lineups and stuff, but there's, we need something more interesting. There should be a place where you can get, specialty stuff. So someone opened that. This woman named Sarah opened something like that. And I think that there's a part of me that was sort of jealous. I was like, oh, I wanted to do that. And so after a little while, as a friend, she would come and ask me questions. And then at one point, she just came to me and said, hey, I'll make you a 20% owner of this place, which was called Bear Creek Beers, if you help me do some of these things. And so I accepted and never took any money or anything from it. It was just more like a pet project. This was fascinating to me. Then that changed hands, and I had another partner there. And then it didn't go well, and it ended up closing. And there was all of this extra beer lying around. So I contacted Wally, who's my partner, one of my partners there now, and essentially said to him, hey, there's a lot of beer. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but we could get our hands on it for pretty cheap.
Okay.
So we spent several $1,000s, bailing out the previous business and buying the beer and then getting it stored somewhere. And then at that point, we just decided, well, let's make a beer store and let's do it right. Let's move it up onto Main Street. Let's put in a huge cooler because there was no cooling at the original place. And so at that point, we just sort of imagined what would be a neat sort of beer store.
Right.
And so we just kind of built it on that.
The first of its kind in Medford.
Yeah.
I mean, well, you can just go get beer. You can get out of the cooler. There's some on tap.
Yeah. So yes, first of its kind in Medford. I mean, there are definitely places in Medford where you could get creative beer before that. But yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Okay. So
First
tapas
tapas
restaurant.
bar, first beer store.
Exactly. That's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's ballsy.
Yeah, I suppose. Brave, at least.
Very brave.
Yeah. So I think about this sometimes. That one of my favorite quotes from anything is from the chef Marco Pierre White, and he writes in his book Devil in the Kitchen. So he was the youngest person to ever get 3 Michelin stars, and he was 24 years old when he was awarded his third Michelin star. And in his sort of biography, he's got this great quote that I think about, and that I've constantly thought about, when doing this. And he says, I didn't get to where I am because I'm talented. There were plenty of other people who were just as talented as me, or maybe even more talented. I got to where I am because I was brave. And I think that is one of those things that, maybe that's what ties this back into, that whole Scotland and Greece thing. Like, well, now you can do it.
Now you know you can do it.
It's the sort of have no fear. Like, just move forward. Be too stupid to fail,
Awesome.
Too single-minded.
I love that. We're going to wrap up a little bit and get to the final three.
Sorry.
But no. You have, we can't wrap this up without talking about your 3 kiddos. You have twins.
Yes.
And then there's Caitlin.
Yeah. Yeah, we have Colin and Alexis, the 9-year-old twins.
I just want to say, Colin and Alexis, I met them when, right when they were born.
They still had that new baby smell.
Yes. They love me. Like,
They do love you.
anytime I go over, Alexis more so than Colin, but there was a time where they loved me. Caitlin, nope, not even a little bit. She gives me the stink eye every time I see her, and she's like, lady, I don't know who you are, but get that goofy grin away from me.
She's probably after Chuck.
Probably. But they're so different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sit here and gush about kids. That's kind of boring.
It's okay. They're yours.
Yeah, they are mine.
They are yours.
Yeah,
Right?
they are. We haven't figured out who the mother is yet. But I mean, each one of them is so fantastically different from each other one.
Yes.
And I will say this: I don't know that I ever really intended to have children. It was never like I'm not having kids. But there was also, as traveling around, I was basically retired until I was 30. You go through this whole thing. It was never really anything that I never really looked forward and thought, I plan on having children either. But then I met this amazing woman who said, I plan on having children. And I was like, well, I guess that means I'm part of that plan.
Right.
So
that's Danny.
Yeah. Guess I'm having children.
Yes. Awesome. Well, they're all adorable. Even Caitlin, she's adorable.
She really is. You'll like her.
She just doesn't like me. I love her. I think
she doesn't like humans. Yeah, she has that problem.
She's adorable. They're hilarious too. Very funny kids. All right, final 3. Best advice you've ever been given.
I don't know. Probably being told that the best job you can ever have is the job that you make for yourself.
Some good advice there. If you were ever to leave this place, what would bring you back? What would you miss the most?
About Southern Oregon?
Because you've come back a lot.
I have come back a lot. I like that, and maybe it's because the apple never falls too far from the tree. I'm willing to admit that might be part of it. That it's comfortable here. I have established relationships. I have there's a nexus of friends and family that make this a comfortable space. But if I ever left and came back, I think that'd probably be why I would come back. You know, if I didn't have that, there wouldn't be a reason to come back necessarily, because I don't know that I will leave.
Okay.
So if I left, then there would be a reason for leaving, and I can't really look into the future to know what the reason for coming back would be. Although I love living close to the mountains. I love being, you know, I like winter sports. I like rafting. I like hiking. I, you know, love going to lakes. You know, so it's that sort of outdoorsy kind of thing that I enjoy.
You consider this home?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, and that's why I've done whatever I've done here. Every single business that I've opened, or, you know, whether it's Elements or Beerworks or the other Beerworks or the, you know, Medford Beer Week or the Southern Oregon Craft Brew Festival, all of those things are things that my goal is ultimately to make Medford and Southern Oregon a better place when I leave it than it was when I found it. And so, yeah, I don't think you decorate someone else's home. So, you know, if I'm trying to decorate, this is probably my home.
That's also some best advice that I've ever heard. Always leave something better than how you found it. Just good advice there. Okay, my favorite question. If you were ever given a final meal and a final drink, what would that look like?
You told me to prep for this one.
I did, because I know you. You're a foodie.
I know. So, and it's almost impossible. I don't even know how to answer it at this point. So you know, I guess I have a couple of answers. One answer is, I hope I don't ever have to make that decision. Like, I would like to get hit by a meteor or just have it all end. You know, I'm not necessarily interested in being like, oh God, this is my last meal.
Right.
You know, like,
That's a good point.
That's
Who
a
wants
lot
to
of pressure.
eat your final meal?
Yeah.
Like, I would be nervous the whole time.
Yeah,
This
right?
is it.
You couldn't even enjoy it.
Oh man, I need to rethink this question.
So maybe the day before meals.
Okay.
You know, my final meal, you know, probably if it was breakfast, I really like Eggs Benedict.
Nice.
You know, lunch, I think a nice big sort of sub sandwich, some kind of, you know, with like Havarti cheese and pepperoncinis and, you know, some simple pleasure things.
Maybe a beer to go with it.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, so champagne in the morning.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
And then a beer in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Maybe if it's my last meal, and then a beer right after the champagne. Like, let's day drink if it's...
Absolutely. This is it. This is all you got.
This is all you got? I'm day drinking.
Okay.
And then, you know, I mean, I don't know, on dinner there's so many amazing foods all over the place, but, you know, if I had to choose I think probably something that would be like really rich and, you know, anything along those, you know, lines. I love, probably my favorite is duck confit. So some kind of duck confit would definitely be it. And then if it's the last meal, I'd probably sign off with a champagne as well.
Right.
And just say, get it out.
Fall asleep.
Waiter, check please.
Yeah. Exactly.
Go straight down.
That's awesome. All right, Chris Dennett. Go see Chris at Elements or Beerworks. Grab a beer, grab some tapas.
Yeah, come in, check us out.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes and you like it, please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps other people find us. You can also listen to this podcast on Google Play. You can check out the video portion at ktvl.com. All you have to do is click on features and then off script. Once again, Chris Dennett. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.